Hello guys and welcome to Harry's Movie Channel. So as we all know, if a film does particularly well at the box office or is well received by critics, it will of course receive a sequel, and this sequel can be the start of a franchise and they make more and so on. It seems to be what Hollywood is best at doing nowadays. And while there are some examples of sequels doing well, just as well as their predecessors or even improving upon them, most of the time they tend to fall flat, and this video is going to demonstrate that. As well as you've probably guessed by the title, I'm going to be talking about the top 10 worst movie sequels. Now, first of all, a couple of things I want to get straight before we get into the video. This is just my opinion. If I moan about a film you like, it's not to necessarily make you feel upset or angry or to piss anyone off. I'm just simply expressing my opinion. This shouldn't reflect at all on what your worst or best sequels are. This is just my opinion. I'm simply just criticizing these films and sort of talking about the main issues I have with them. That's really the main purpose of this video. Another thing is that I'm only talking about sequels on this list. I'm not going to talk about remakes or prequels or stuff like that, mainly because I think they deserve their own list, because there's a lot of bad remakes as well. So yeah. So before we get into the actual top 10, I do have a few honourable mentions. So these are films which I don't necessarily hate. They're not bad enough to be in the top 10, but they're sequels which I don't really like very much. So the first honourable mention is Mission Impossible 2. I admire like Paramount Pictures and stuff for taking a different direction from the first Mission Impossible film, but they executed it quite badly in my mind. I mean, they focus a lot on making Tom Cruise look good as opposed to actually making a good film, which didn't help. But the main issue I have with it is that for the whole first half of the film, there's little to no action scenes. I mean, most of it is just this love story, which I really don't care about. And it takes a very long time to get going, this film. It's not until about an hour, at least an hour in, where I think that there's this massive shootout in a lab. And when the action actually does happen, it's sometimes quite fun, like the motorbike chase at the end, and then other times they really overdo all the slow-mo. I mean, I know that John Woo is a fan of slow-mo and putting doves flying around in his films, but it doesn't work here. I mean, the slow-mo they might as well have shot the whole film in slow motion if they're going to do what they do here, because I swear, like, literally every 10 seconds, there's this massive action sequence, and it just cuts to like a slow-mo shot of Tom Cruise on his motorbike from the flames behind him, and he just gets so annoying after a while. And also the story is just boring. I mean, it's about this disease that the main villain wants to unleash on the world. It kind of sounds familiar with COVID around. So yeah, that's Mission Impossible 2. Not a terrible film, but I'm not a big fan. Next honourable mention is Ocean's 12. I mean, I love Ocean's 11. I think it's one of the classic heist films. And then this film, I mean, it's just not as exciting, because the main premise is that they have to return the money that they stole from the casino in the first film. And which, I mean, if you're going to make a sequel, that kind of makes sense as a direction to go in, but it's just not as fun when they're just reversing what they did before, really. And then I've got X-Men Apocalypse as another honourable mention. This film, it's just so it's just so unexciting and boring compared to other X-Men movies in my mind. Especially when you consider that it came after Days of Future Past and First Class, and they're both two of I put those two among the best in the series. And then this film comes along, and it just it's a very hard film to sit through. And I've got another superhero film. I've got The Amazing Spider-Man 2. This has a lot of the same issues as Apocalypse, I think. I mean, it's too long. It's a very slow-moving film, and Andrew Garfield, I mean, he's a great actor. I mean, Hacksaw Ridge, The Social Network. If you watch those films, he can act. He's a really good actor, but as Spider-Man, just doesn't work for me, I don't think. Yeah, I mean, I think Tobey Maguire is probably my favoured Spider-Man actor. Um, and then my last honourable mention is Men in Black 2. This film, at least it's short, I'll give it that, but it's still very, very. I mean, the comedy in this film. I mean, the first Men in Black film has lots of classic sort of scenes of comedy and action blended in. This film just didn't really have enough of that for my liking. The villains were just really annoying and silly. I just didn't like them. So yeah, they're all of the honourable mentions out the way, and now we're going to get into the top 10. So, number 10, the 10th worst sequel in my opinion, is Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Now, the main problem I have with this film is that, well, in the original three Indiana Jones films, you have this sort of weird, sort of mythology, like, there's all these weird mythical things, like there's like a box that if you open it, your face is going to melt off. There's, a cup that if you drink from it, you'll turn into a skeleton. Like, obviously, all this stuff is very fantasy based, but it doesn't blow it out of proportion too much. Whereas this one, we're going to put aliens in, we're going to have a massive UFO spaceship at the end, and it's not what Indiana Jones is about. And I think that's where they went wrong with this film mainly. I mean, it was cool to see Harrison Ford come back. I liked that. But why but that doesn't really mean anything if the film he's coming back to play Indiana Jones in isn't well made. Another problem is I mean, it has a few good action scenes, like the motorbike chase through that village, and then the chase with the old jeeps, like through this massive jungle. That was quite fun. But after that, the film just slows down so much, and I just feel tempted to just turn it off. And also, I need to address the elephant in the room, which is the horrible CGI towards the end with the aliens and the CGI vines with Shia LaBeouf swinging through them. That's another problem, actually. Shia LaBeouf is bloody annoying in this film. I mean, he's recently demonstrated he can act pretty well, but here he's just not very good. So yeah, that's Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Rubbish film, I hate it. So, number 9, I'm getting into some really bad ones now, as you can probably tell, is Rocky 5. Now, the Rocky series is one of my favourite franchises. I adore the original one, and all of the other sequels I think are pretty good. I even really like the Creed films. Yeah, I love all the films in that sort of Rocky Creed universe, apart from this one. And the main reason I don't like this film is because it just doesn't feel like a Rocky film. I mean, the main premise of this film is that obviously Rocky discovers he's had this, I think, injury to his head or something from being punched in the face so many times, and also he has to like sell his house, and he moves back to Philadelphia because of a tax problem or something, and so I guess it sort of goes back to the original film's roots, which is nice, but there's this weird sort of thing going on with this other man who he meets that he trains, and he just like ignores his own son's concerns, and it just baffles me why you would focus on someone you hardly know over your own son. Like, it just sort of makes Rocky look like a real douchebag, in comparison to the sort of likable guy that he is in the other films. And just like there's this really dumb street fight towards the end. I don't know what that's all about. It really just This film really falls flat. It's one of the most poorly made films I've ever seen. I'll say that. Yeah, it sucks. It's a terrible film, and I hate it. So number 8. This is a fairly recent film, actually. The Predator, the 2018 film, I believe. So I never consider the Predator franchise to be amazing. I mean, I love the original one. The Predator 2, I think, is good. Not great, but it's good. I wasn't a fan on the third film from about 10 years ago called, I think it's called Predators or something, but that one I wasn't a huge fan of. And this one was just awful. I mean, I thought the story was ridiculous, how the sort of predator, it comes to Earth for autism. Why would you make a Predator film based on that? And this one child sort of discovers that Predator mask and wears it, and bad things happen. It's a very very silly plot. And on top of that, it's just, I mean, a lot of, like with a lot of the other films on this list, just got a really, really, really bad problem with the pacing. It just, I mean, when you think about the original Predator film, the thing that made that film so great was it was just a constant thrill ride from start to finish, and this film just is the complete opposite of that. It's just so much talking, and there's barely any action from what I remember until the very end, and the last sort of 20 minutes of this film aren't even great either, and that's like the big finale. That's the bit that is supposed to be the best part of the film, and it falls flat. So yeah, that's pretty much all I've got to say on that film. Moving on. So number 7 is another fairly recent film and a sequel to a film which I really enjoy. Independence Day Resurgence, I think it's called, the second Independence Day film. I love the original Independence Day. I mean, it's one of those classic disaster films, which I think that, everybody, if you haven't seen Independence Day, go and check it out because it's a great film. And this film, it just completely disrespects everything that made that film so great. It's just devoid of all of the good parts of that original film. The aliens come back, which I guess makes sense if they tried to take over the Earth the first time and they failed. They would, you'd think they would do it again, which is what they do in this film. But it's just such a waste of potential because the main sort of thing that made the original film so good in my mind was it's not particularly real. It's fairly dumb with the action. It goes over the top at a lot of points, but you can sort of appreciate that because it knows it doesn't take itself too seriously. It just sort of, it's one of those films where it's like, yeah, we're a silly film, just sit back and enjoy the ride. And I think that's what they were trying to go for in this film as well, towards the end, when they have that massive sort of battle on the salt flats or whatever. But it's just, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work when you try to do the same thing again after 20 years. I mean, there's this, sort of massive, like, queen alien. It reminds me of Aliens a lot, actually, because there's this massive queen one, which is pretty cool, I suppose. I mean, it looks quite scary. It's quite massive. It destroys a lot of things, but that's like the only fun part of the film is literally the last like 10 minutes. Even the end credits are probably more fun than most of the scenes in this movie. It's just, yeah, very dull, and I wish it was never made. So number 6, Batman and Robin. I mean, this film has a pretty, it's renowned for being not only one of the worst sequels ever made, but one of the worst films, period. And it definitely shows when you watch it because for a start, it looks horrible. It's just such a poorly acted, ugly film. That's the main. If I had to sum this film up in one word, it would be ugly, because this film just looks awful. Not only that, but the acting is. I mean, Chris O'Donnell as Robin. All he does is just go. He just moans about how he doesn't get to be on the same level as Batman, and he's like, it's Batman and Robin, not Robin and Batman. And just hearing that, like, over the 2-hour length or whatever, oh my god, it gets on my nerves so bloody much, honestly. It's absolutely ridiculous how annoying that is. I mean, I can't even explain it properly. It's that bad. And the other problem is it's just filled with lots of really unfunny jokes, and you have Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze, which, it's an interesting casting choice, I'll say that. But all he does in the film is just say stupid puns and jokes about ice, and it's like, it's a cool party. It's just, yeah, this film is, it's more of an endurance test than a film, of how much sort of mental suffering one can take from hearing stuff like that for 2 hours. So yeah, I have no plan on watching this film again anytime soon, despite the fact I have it on Blu-ray just there. But yeah, I hate this film with a passion. That's pretty much my final verdict on this movie. So number 5, This one is particularly annoying for me. Terminator Salvation. Now, the reason it annoys me to have to talk about this film is because I think the Terminator franchise had a pretty good track record until this film. I mean, obviously you have the first film, which is an instant classic. You have the second film, which is one of the best films ever made, and it's one of my all-time favorites. And then you have Terminator 3, which, while definitely nowhere near as good as the original two films, it, at least it was fun. I mean, it didn't. It's the sort of Terminator film where it doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's a fun ride. And this film just, I mean, for a start, I'm already mentioning Arnold Schwarzenegger again, but he's not in this film at all. Which just, I mean, there's like a brief scene of like a CGI version of him towards the end, but he doesn't actually appear properly in this film, and I just don't see the point in making a Terminator film if you don't have the main actor associated with the franchise. It just doesn't make sense to me why they would make this sort of spin-off film about this war and John Connor sort of trying to protect everybody. Um, it's just boring. It feels like this film is missing something really important. That's basically the point I'm trying to get across here. It's just bad in every way, pretty much. I honestly can't think of really anything good about this film other than Christian Bale as John Connor. He's fantastic. I mean, well, Christian Bale's fantastic in everything I've seen him in, but he is really good in this film, and he's really the only thing that makes this film even slightly watchable in my mind. So, coming in at number four is a film which I think generally has a very low reputation anyway, and that is the fifth Die Hard film, A Good Day to Die Hard. Now, of course, this film has many of the same problems as other films on this list, such as it's boring, it's just a badly made film for a start. The action is just not exciting at all. But the main problem with this film, which sets it apart from the other ones, is just how much it disrespects the franchise as a whole. Because what was the thing that made John McClane so great in the original films? I mean, he was an ordinary man in extraordinary situations. I mean, take for example the original Die Hard. He was just a normal cop from New York. He came to LA to see his wife at Christmas, and these terrorists took over the building, and you know it was all down to him to protect everybody. Like, that was not a situation he expected to happen. He was a normal man in an extraordinary situation. And this film, just for a start, he is portrayed as just nothing but a bit of a dickhead, really. I mean, for example, there's a scene where he basically goes full on Grand Theft Auto and steals a massive Mercedes G-Wagon and literally crushes over cars with people in them, you know, and they're just normal civilians. That's not what the character of John McClane is about. He's a hero, not a bloody dickhead who doesn't show like any respect for the people around him, because that's what he's portrayed to be in this film. Another thing is that he is constantly being spoken down to all the time by his son. I mean, that's just not nice to watch, is having our hero just constantly spoken down to throughout the vast majority of the runtime by his own son, and then these two just bickering back and forth all the time. It's just such an unpleasant viewing experience in my mind. And considering the fact that it takes everything that was great about the previous films and just chucks it straight out the window, that is I found it very, very annoying and very hard to sit through. So that's enough of A Good Day to Die Hard. Number three is Alien 3. Yes, another film which completely disrespects the previous movies. Because Aliens is a film which you may remember was in my top 5 films that I don't like that others do like. That is a film that has recently, my opinion has changed a lot on that, and I actually really like that movie now. And after rewatching all of the Alien films, obviously the first two and then getting to this one, the first 5 minutes is some of the most anger-inducing stuff I've ever seen in a film, because it takes all the victorious because obviously, you know, the ending of Aliens, they all escape, everybody is safe. Well, not everybody, because people died in that film, but you know, our lead characters survived being attacked by all these aliens and they killed them, and the mission was overall a success. Then this film begins, and in the first 5 minutes, 2 of our 3 main characters get killed off instantly, and that is one of the biggest sins, I guess you could say, that a sequel can commit is when it undermines the victory that a previous film sort of created, or it just completely chucks out the window anything great or any great events that happened in the previous film. So that is the main reason why this film annoys me as much as it does. But another reason is that it's such a waste of potential. I mean, for those of you who haven't seen this film, basically the idea is that Ellen Ripley, the main character, she gets stranded on this prison planet with no weapons, and that could have made for a really fun sort of prison escape film with the alien running around the prison. That could have been really fun. But instead, they decide to make it a really boring, dull, drama-focused story, which is just so frustrating to watch because it doesn't show that it just doesn't show that the filmmakers are trying. And I know that obviously this film was directed by David Fincher, his first film, and he later did films like Fight Club, Seven, The Social Network, stuff like that. And he's gone on to, with those films, proven to be a really talented director. And I understand, and I don't blame him for this film because I understand there was lots of studio interference, and that it just goes to show that studio interference can really have a negative effect on a film, and this for me is the prime example. So now we're getting into the top two worst sequels, in my opinion, and coming in at number two is The Matrix Revolutions. Now, the past couple of films I've spoken about are examples of films completely disrespecting what was great about a franchise. But this film makes those two films look like what they're doing is tolerable. Because you know, what was the great thing about the character of Neo? He was a hero who didn't really realize it. Like, for example, in the original Matrix, he was the one. He didn't realize that yet, but he sort of slowly kind of learned the position he was in and became a hero because of it. And in this film, he gets in a fight with someone. His eyes, he goes blind after this laser thing goes in his face, and he can't see. And that itself doesn't bother me as much as the fact that he just doesn't have any screen time for most of the film. It's mostly about this war with these machines, and just it's so. I mean, for a start, it's boring because half the people involved I don't know or care about, and also it just goes on. It's the same rubbish for like half an hour or something. It's just these massive mech warrior things just shooting at these weird robot things literally for half an hour. That's all that happens. There's no sort. You don't really get an idea of what people are doing other than them just shooting at machines. There's no sort of interesting moments of, the characters sort of having fun with each other. There's just no sense of creativity in this film. It's just, let's make some money by marketing this film as the last of the trilogy. And it really falls flat, this film. It really falls flat, and it's probably not... And as well as being maybe the second worst sequel, that's probably one of the worst films I've ever seen. But not as bad as our number one choice, because our number one choice makes this film look like The Godfather or, anything that has been acclaimed to that level. Because number one, I truly believe is one of the worst films ever made, as well as being the worst sequel. It's probably the worst action film I've ever seen. It really, really sucks. And the film I'm referring to is Speed 2, Cruise Control. Yeah, I could just sum this I could just sum up this whole film by saying that everything about it is bad, which is my genuine sort of opinion on it. But I mean, I really can't think of anything good about this film. It's boring. The action is just... I mean, the action is almost kind of non-existent in this film because it doesn't feel like action. It just feels like, oh, there's this massive emergency on a cruise ship and everybody's got to evacuate it. That isn't really what... If that's what the film is about, that's not an action film in my mind. That is just a film that pretends to be action-focused and thrilling, and it's not. I mean, for instance, I know Titanic is kind of the same thing with, a cruise ship, people emerging, but that film actually had somewhat of a story to it. This film doesn't. It's just stuff happens. Like, why? Like, we never know why it happens, or or how it connects to the original Speed in any way, because it doesn't. I mean, Keanu Reeves is absent for one thing. In fact, speaking of its connection to the original film, that's another thing that really annoys me, because I adore the original Speed. It's one of my all-time favourite films, and the fact that it's associated to this absolute shit stain of a film, it pisses me off so much. If I could erase one film from existence, it would be this, because I do not want it to exist. I don't want it to be associated with the original film, but it does exist, and I am so annoyed that it does. I don't plan to ever watch it again. Just every single thing I can think of about this film is bad. Um, it's just... I highly recommend avoiding it. I'll say that. So, yeah, that's pretty much it, I suppose. The top 10 worst movie sequels. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, even though it was just me ranting about 10 films I absolutely hate, but... No, I guess more because of the honourable mentions, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye for now.